So this morning we have Akash presenting on suppressing tumor growth through running and exercise. He's a first-time presenter, so clarification questions only. So give him a hand.
So the title of my paper is Voluntary Running Suppresses Tumor Growth Through Epinephrine and IL-6 Dependent NK Cell Mobilization and Distribution. So in simpler terms, how running can suppress tumor growth through epinephrine and NK cells. So the background is that this study is targeting melanoma, which is a cancer that kills over 10,000 people in the United States annually. And the three main terms that will be popping up over and over as I explain this are epinephrine, which you guys probably better know as adrenaline, NK cells, which are natural killer cells, and they provide rapid responses to infected cells and tumor formation. And IL-6, which stimulates a protein that stimulates the immune response. So the initial experimental design of this study was that they had 4 groups of mice, which they inoculated with B16F10 melanoma after 4 weeks of wheel running. So they had 4 groups of these mice, and the first group was the control group, which didn't do any running in the 4 weeks before or the 2 weeks after the injection. The experiment, where they only ran for the 4 weeks before, the experiment they only ran for the 2 weeks after, and the experiment they ran before and after. And that's just simplified on this point. Okay. Yeah.
Akash, why did they do the after study, or after B16 run?
Because they wanted to see, like, after you get the cancer, if running still helps you with the infection.
Okay, so they wanted to distinguish between the 3. Okay, got it.
Just want to see, like, before and after. Alright, so they noticed a significant amount of tumor reduction, especially in the groups that ran before, in the 4 weeks before it, and that was 61%. And you can see on the graph all the way on the left there that the control group, as expected, had the most tumor volume because they didn't do any running whatsoever. And the running after didn't have much of an impact either because they had tumor growth, a tumor volume similar to the control group. And then the experiments where they ran all the time and only before actually had a significant reduction in tumor growth, but there's no statistically significant difference between those 2 groups.
Between which 2 groups?
The groups that ran before and the groups that ran before. So in the second graph, you can see the vast reduction in tumor volume in the experimental group compared to the control group. So it just obviously had an impact. And they also noticed that lung metastasis of the tumors also dramatically reduced after inoculation on this graph here, because you can see it's like around half of what it was. Okay, so they've noticed significant differences, and they want to figure out the mechanism of how this is happening. So they measured the frequencies of immune cells in tumors by using flow cytometry, which is basically a method where you can pass particles through lasers and they tag them to show like what specific proteins or anything. So on the left there, you can see how in like several kind of proteins there's a significant difference in the experimental compared to the control, and it showed drastically increased infiltration of NK cells as well as CD3 T cells and dendritic cells. And this graph on the right basically blows up the NK cell portion, which you can see is a massive difference in the experimental compared to the control. So this is the thing they want to look at next and explore. So they wanted to make sure that it was actually NK cells doing the work in the tumors. So they used anemic mice, which basically they don't have functional B cells, but they still have NK cells as for their immune system. And they noticed that even in these mice with the wheel running, there was a 66% reduction in the tumor growth with the full 6 weeks of running, 4 weeks before and 2 weeks after. So they concluded that T cells were not responsible for the suppressive effect, and it was actually the NK cells.
Can you why did they use these mice again?
Because they noticed that they wanted to make sure that it was NK cells that were doing, like, attacking the tumor growth and not some other part of the immune system, so they used mice in which T cells were knocked out.
Oh, so they suspected either NK or T?
Yeah.
And then so this because these guys lack T, if you see the effect,
yeah,
then it has to be the NK.
Yeah. Okay. So and that's what you can see on the left there when they knocked out. In the experimental, even with the anthemic mice, the tumor reduction still went down significantly, which means that the NK cells had a large effect. So, and they also wanted to figure out if they blocked the NK cells, would there still be some kind of effect? That would be something test for it. So when they blocked the NK cells with an anti-CALO-GM1 antibody, the suppressive effect of running was abolished, and that's what you can see on the graph on the right here. Basically, there's no difference when they were in the second column. There's basically no difference because they knocked out NK cells. So, next they wanted to figure out, does running affect the cytotoxicity of the NK cells? So basically, they wanted to figure out if running sparked some kind of change that made the NK cells attack the cancer more efficiently, or if NK cells from the control and running groups would still do the same job if they wanted to. So what they did was they used the NK depleted portion as a negative control and saw that it had no killing. And that on the graph on the left there, you can see the bottom two graphs are basically the control for the B16 and the experimental, and you can see that they're extremely similar in trajectories and they almost overlap. So basically, there was no significant difference if the NK cells came from the control group or the running group when they attacked the tumor. And on the right here, they saw that tumors from the running mice had increased mRNA expression of NK cell activating receptor ligands, such as those, and basically that shows that the tumors from the running mice were recruiting NK cells.
Okay, so I'm sorry, my brain's not working quite well today. How did they determine whether the NK cells were effectively killing?
Because it was here where they determined that, because
They determined here that they were killing.
Yeah.
But in this next graph, you're trying to talk about the efficiency of killing specifically, and then comparing that to mice that have no NK cells.
Right. So that's the graph on the left where it basically shows the effector to target ratio, so how much the NK cells can take out of the tumor. And
So if something's high on that graph, it's
okay. The first two things you see there are a different type of cancer, and that's something that wasn't the main focus of the study.
Can you point to what you're talking about? No, just use your finger.
Okay. So basically, these two, the ones that start up higher, are a different part of the study. So that wasn't really.
So we're not looking at that.
Yeah, we're not looking at that. But the bottom two, the black one is the control. So that was the NK cells that came from mice that didn't do any running.
Okay.
And this one, the gray one, is the experimental. So that came from the mice that did the running. And you can see that those almost overlap. So there wasn't a significant difference in the toxicity of the NK cells that came from the control group or the running. It was just the NK cells that did.
Okay. You just said it's not. The NK cells were acting the same for both groups.
Yeah.
And then you said that the NK cells were acting differently.
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So the next thing they want to figure out is how to get these NK cells to attack the tumor and find it. So basically, in previous study, exercise had been shown to mobilize NK cells through epinephrine. And in other studies, when the wheel running was at its peak, they showed that EPI levels, EPI is epinephrine, and that's just the abbreviation I'm going to use for the rest of the presentation. So in their own study, the EPI levels in the running group were double that of the control, and that's what we can see on the left graph over there. The experimental levels of epinephrine were just much higher than the control group. So what they did to try to simulate the exercise was to give low and high doses of epinephrine to the mice, and they saw that there was a reduction in spleen volume and the number of NK cells. So this could be a little bit confusing, so I'm going to explain a bit. So basically NK cells, they can be found in several organs of the body, but the one they focused on was the spleen. So what they tried to figure out was if the number of NK cells in the spleen were decreasing, that means that they were being recruited to go fight the cancer. So what they were looking for was a decrease, not an increase. So that's what we can see on the right here, that the number of NK cells and the spleen itself, the volume went down because they were being recruited to fight the cancer thanks to the epinephrine injection. Does that make sense to everybody? So the next thing they wanted to do was to prove the role of the
Take it out.
So, confirming the role of the epinephrine. So basically, they blocked the EPI-dependent mobilization, and that blunted the increased NK cell infiltration in the tumors. So basically, that's what you can see on the graph on the left. In the normal groups, the tumor volume went way down, as we saw before. When they blocked the NK cell, when they blocked the epinephrine with the propranolol, but basically, the tumor volume didn't change again. So what they did next was mimic the exercise-related epinephrine surge through daily low-dose injections in the non-running mice. So mice without running were basically given like a stimulant that tried to simulate the effects of exercise. So, and that still resulted in a 61% reduction in tumor volume and NK cells were, but what they saw was that the NK cell infiltration was greater than it was in the control group without anything, but it was still less than it was in running. So basically the simulated effect didn't do as much as it did in normal running, but it still did more than it did.
So in the first slide you mentioned that epinephrine is basically another word for adrenaline.
Yeah.
So is exercise-related API different than like adrenaline you get from like bungee jumping?
I don't think so, but I can't really answer that.
When you're saying that they're giving them a low dose of something during the day, every day, to like stimulate exercise, is that something like a mix of hormones and things to stimulate exercise, or is that just like straight epinephrine injections?
The way they
If you
made
don't
it,
know that, that's fine.
and the way they made it sound, it was just straight epinephrine, but I don't know. Sure.
Okay.
Right. So, the next thing what they wanted to do was they noticed that IL-6 levels, which is that protein I talked about before that stimulates the immune response, they were much higher, like 7 times higher in the wheel running groups than it was in the control groups. So they wanted to figure out what kind of effect this was having, because obviously that's a significant difference. So they noticed that the amount of IL-6 positive NK cells in the spleen after the epinephrine injection, and that basically indicated that epinephrine-dependent mobilization was towards IL-6 positive NK cells. So there's something specific about those. And as we can see on the left over there, in the spleen, the number of IL-6 positive NK cells went down by almost half. So basically when the cells disappear from the spleen, that means they're being recruited to attack the tumor. So this is where they're looking for a decrease, and they got that decrease. So what they saw was next they wanted to block IL-6.
Wait, do that again.
Yeah, that's a little bit confusing. So basically, the amount of IL-6 positive NK cells in the spleen were halved after the epinephrine injection, which basically shows that epinephrine-dependent mobilization is targeting the IL-6 positive NK cells. So that's what the graph on the left is showing there, that the IL-6 positive NK cells basically halved in the spleen after the epinephrine injection. Yeah.
So does that mean that the other half left the spleen?
Yeah.
To like the rest of the
Yeah.
body?
To mainly attack the tumor.
Yeah.
Do they have any evidence of it leaving?
Yeah, I mean, there's more graphs showing that I didn't put in here, but basically there were graphs showing that there was an increased NK cell infiltration in the tumor.
Okay.
That's
So
what they're-
decreased in the spleen, increased in the tumor. Going from spleen to tumor.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing they wanted to do was figure out what would happen if they blocked IL-6. So they used, and basically what they showed on the middle graph here was that again in the control, the tumor growth the tumor reduction was massive, but when they put in the anti-IL-6 antibodies, the tumor volume still decreased, but not by nearly as much, and not like very statistically significant. So basically that shows that IL-6 clearly has a massive impact, whatever it's doing. And on the right here, they also showed that the percentage of NK cells were very different when they put in the anti-IL-6, because in the control group, as we showed before, the NK cell infiltration was much larger because more were being recruited to attack the tumor. When they put in the anti-IL-6, it actually decreased violently. Okay.
For those two graphs for NK, are they now just giving them an injection? Like it's no longer just running?
And this was actually with running.
Okay.
Not the injections. Okay. So the overall summary of what they've done in the paper is that they've showed that the first thing they did was show that running led to tumor reduction. And then they figured out that there was a greater NK cell infiltration when they in the reduced tumors, so the running sparked that NK cell infiltration. And then they figured out that NK cells were mobilized by epinephrine, so this is how they simulated all the tests without actually doing exercise on mice. And then they noticed that IL-6 levels were much higher in the NK cells targeting the tumors, and the epinephrine and running were basically recruiting IL-6 positive NK cells. So, any questions on that? Yeah.
For the last slide, for that, what are all the colors? What are the colors? Could you just?
Okay, so the colors are just basically in the control groups, like basically in the groups that did running and the groups that didn't do, and the groups that, sorry, okay, so the black is the groups that didn't run whatsoever, and then when they did, and then basically the gray group is the experiment, whatever the experiment was, that's what, like, basically in the first one, like the EPI injection, and the second one with like the anti-6 antibodies. So no questions. Yeah.
So are all these things like specific to running, or could activities like swimming and other activities like lower tumor reduction and increased tumor reduction as well?
So what they did in the study initially was running specifically, but with the epinephrine injections, basically that doesn't have to just come from running. Like swimming and stuff would still lead to an increase in the adrenaline or epinephrine. So with the EPI injections, you're still stimulating like any kind of exercise in general, but what they focused on was the running. Okay. So the overall conclusion of this paper was that it's not about the running as much as it is about the mechanisms, because the mice in this study were running about 4 to 5 kilometers a day, which is obviously not like practical for a cancer patient, and they're not going to be able to do that. So basically, the point of this paper is to figure out mechanisms that they can target for future cancer therapies. So the real question is, how can we use the epinephrine-dependent IL-6 positive NK cell mobilization to attack cancer and other future cancer?
Okay, I'm not expecting you to like be able to answer this, but I think one of the questions I have after reading this is like, if an increase in epinephrine is leading to decreased tumor sizes, then why are athletes, like say like professional athletes, why do they still get cancer? Like, how can you explain that? I'm not asking you to like answer that, but it's just kind of like a general. Yeah, like if anybody can.
And like what I would say to that was that like it wasn't the exercise and stuff wasn't stopping the cancer. It's just that when they got the cancer, it was helping reduce the tumor growth.
So previous exercise reduced future tumor growth.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can only speak anecdotally here, but I think the links between like exercise and cancer are pretty strong. Or the inverse relationship between exercise and cancer are pretty strong. I don't know if anybody back there can.
I've heard that. I've read some papers.
I think what's interesting to me is that epinephrine is also in the stress pathway, and stress actually increases tumor growth.
But isn't that, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't tumor growth related to stress mainly correlated with like cortisol?
Yes.
Rather than epinephrine?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, at some point, the epinephrine, unless your brain is handling this really well, getting jacked with epinephrine at some point is going to cause you some stress. Right? Like if you're.
I've been there and done that.
Yeah. So no, I'm just kind of interested in how the two pathways diverge.
In the title, I think, was the word voluntary? Like, did that?
Yeah,
What did that mean in terms of this?
Honestly, I have no clue.
Because
I don't think they gave it much
The
thought.
mice didn't really have a choice.
No, they did. They did. They weren't forced to run on the wheel.
But isn't that just like a natural, like,
They just put the wheel in there. They didn't force them to run on the wheel.
how do they do that?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, but if you throw a mouse on a wheel, they're not necessarily going to move their body anyway.
Right.
So,
So I think no, it's actually really interesting. Like the mechanisms of voluntary action. versus involuntary exercise.
Since the mice only had one type of cancer, melanoma, did they ever look at like if this pathway was effective on other types of cancer?
Right. So the main focus of the study was melanoma, but like I showed in this like graph over here, they had a different type of cancer as well, and that was like the first two basically lines on the like higher up. So they looked at other types of cancers, but they kind of did them sparingly and not with as much focus as they did the melanoma. So that's why I focused the presentation on the melanoma. But it still had similar effects, like all around.
Next week we have Ben, yeah, there you are, presenting on Zika virus and microcephaly. So please come out and support. Thank you.